The rain drummed steadily against the windows of the concert hall as Eliza played her final piece of the evening. Her fingers glided over the piano keys, weaving a melody that held the audience captive. Music was her sanctuary, the language she spoke fluently since she was a child. But that night, as she stepped outside into the storm, everything changed. The accident happened in an instant. The car's headlights blinded her, the screech of tires cutting through the rain. When she woke up in the hospital, the world was eerily silent. At first, she thought it was the drugs or the trauma, but the doctor's words hit her harder than any physical pain. You've lost your hearing. It may not return. Elisa's world shattered. Music was her identity, her livelihood, her joy. Now, silence stretched endlessly before her, cold and unforgiving. She avoided her piano at home, unable to bear its stillness. Days turned into weeks, each filled with frustration and despair. One day, a kind nurse handed her a pamphlet, Learn Sign Language, a new way to communicate. Elisa crumpled it at first, unwilling to accept her new reality. But something inside her stirred a tiny ember of defiance. If she couldn't hear, perhaps she could learn to express herself differently. Hesitant but desperate, she signed up for a class. The room where the classes were held smelled faintly of coffee and books, the walls covered with posters of hand gestures and smiling faces. That was where she met Noah, the instructor. Tall and calm, with a warm but quiet demeanor, Noah greeted her with a gentle smile. We'll start with something simple, he signed, speaking softly for those who could still hear. His kindness was disarming, but Eliza couldn't shake the bitterness weighing on her heart. Still, she nodded, ready to take the first step, however reluctantly. Elisa sat at the back of the classroom, her arms crossed and her gaze fixed on the posters that lined the walls. She wasn't ready to trust this process, but she had nothing to lose. Noah stood at the front, patiently waiting for everyone to settle in. His eyes met hers briefly, and he gave a reassuring nod before beginning. Hello, he signed and spoke aloud simultaneously, making sure the group could follow. Let's start by learning how to greet one another. He demonstrated slowly, his hands moving gracefully as if he were conducting an invisible orchestra. Elisa's skepticism began to waver as she watched Noah interact with the class. He was patient, encouraging, and attentive to everyone's pace. When it was her turn to try, she hesitated. The room seemed to grow quieter, even in the silence she already lived in. It's okay, Noah said gently, stepping closer. Try it with me. He repeated the sign for hello and waited. Elisa's hands felt heavy, awkward, as she mimicked his movement. Her lips pressed into a thin line as she concentrated. Hello, she signed. Noah's smile widened. Perfect. The simple gesture felt monumental. It was as though a door had opened, a small, tentative crack, but a door nonetheless. Encouraged by Noah's calm demeanor, Elisa found herself following along as the class moved to other basic signs. Thank you. I'm sorry, and can I help you? By the end of the hour, Eliza realized her bitterness hadn't completely disappeared, but there was a flicker of something else, curiosity. She stayed behind as the other students filtered out, unsure why she lingered. Noah noticed and approached her. Good first day, he said, his voice low but clear. It takes time, but you're already doing great. Eliza gave a faint nod. Thank you, she signed, her movements still clumsy but improving. For the first time in weeks, her heart felt a little less heavy. As she left the classroom, the crumpled pamphlet still tucked in her bag, she thought, maybe this isn't the end. Maybe it's just different. The next few weeks were a blur of hesitant progress and quiet determination. Elisa attended every class, her hands slowly growing more confident with each lesson. She learned how to introduce herself, ask simple questions, and express her needs. The signs felt foreign at first, her fingers fumbling awkwardly, but Noah's steady encouragement kept her moving forward. In one class, Noah introduced a practical exercise. Imagine you're in a cafe, he said, signing as he spoke. You need to order something. Let's practice. He walked over to Eliza, pretending to be a server. What would you like to drink? He asked, citing the phrase slowly. Elisa hesitated, her mind blanking. The other students watched, waiting. She took a deep breath and signed, "Coffee, please." Her hands trembled slightly, but she completed the phrase. Noah nodded, his face lighting up. Great job. Now, what would you like to eat? Elisa smiled faintly, the corners of her mouth lifting for the first time in weeks. A sandwich, she signed, adding, "Thank you." The class applauded softly, their gestures of approval filling the room. Elisa felt a small spark of pride, an unfamiliar but welcome feeling. For the first time, she thought, maybe I can do this. Outside of class, she practiced constantly. At home, she signed to herself in front of a mirror, repeating words until they felt natural. She even tried using simple phrases with her neighbors, who were patient and kind, often smiling warmly at her efforts. But the piano in her living room remained untouched. Its polished surface reflected the sunlight that streamed through the windows, a silent reminder of what she had lost. She couldn't bring herself to sit on the bench, let alone play. It was as if her music had been locked away, waiting for a key she didn't have. During one class, Noah noticed her lingering sadness. After the lesson, he approached her. You're doing well, he said, his voice soft. But it seems like something is holding you back. Eliza avoided his gaze. I'm fine, she signed, though the words felt hollow. Noah didn't press her, but offered a quiet challenge instead. Sometimes the best way forward is to face what scares you the most. Just think about it. That night, Eliza sat in front of the piano for the first time since the accident. Her fingers hovered over the keys, trembling. She pressed one note, the vibration faintly pulsing through her fingertips. A tear rolled down her cheek, but for the first time, it wasn't from grief, it was from hope. Elisa sat at the piano, her fingers brushing against the cool ivory keys. She couldn't hear the notes, but the faint vibrations under her fingertips stirred something deep within her, a memory of what it felt like to create music. It wasn't the same, but it wasn't nothing. The next day in class, Noah noticed a subtle change in her demeanor. She wasn't smiling yet, but there was a lightness in her movements, a determination that hadn't been there before. After the lesson, as the other students packed up, Noah approached her. Have you played again? He asked, signing the words carefully. Elisa hesitated but nodded. Just one note, she signed back. Noah's smile widened. That's a start. Music isn't just about hearing, it's about feeling, expressing. There's a way to bring it back into your life, even now. Intrigued but skeptical, Eliza listened as Noah explained his idea. We'll use rhythm and vibration. Let me show you. He led her to the front of the classroom, where a small keyboard sat on a table. Noah placed a hand on the side of the instrument and gestured for her to do the same. He pressed a key, and Eliza felt the faint hum of the note resonate beneath her palm. Close your eyes, he said, his voice steady. Feel the music. Elisa obeyed, her eyes fluttering shut. Noah played a simple melody, the vibrations forming a pattern that she could sense. It wasn't the same as hearing, but it was something beautiful and alive. Now you try, Noah encouraged. Elisa placed both hands on the keyboard and hesitated for only a moment before pressing a few keys. The vibrations pulsed through her fingers, uneven at first, but soon she found a rhythm. Her lips parted slightly as she played, and for the first time, she felt a flicker of the joy she thought she had lost forever. Music is still in you, Noah signed, his expression warm and confident. In the weeks that followed, Eliza and Noah worked together to adapt familiar pieces into something she could play and feel. Each lesson brought new challenges, but Eliza embraced them, her confidence growing with every step. She began to see music not as a lost part of her life, but as something she could redefine. One afternoon, after a particularly successful session, Noah shared a piece of his own story. I lost part of my hearing in an accident too, he admitted, his hands moving slowly. But I found new ways to connect with music, with people. That's what I want for you. Eliza was stunned. She had seen Noah as a pillar of strength, someone who had it all together. Knowing that he had faced a similar struggle made her feel less alone. That night, she returned to her piano with a new perspective. She placed her hands on the keys, not expecting perfection, but determined to create something. And as she played, she realized that the silence around her wasn't empty, it was full of potential. The community center buzzed with quiet energy as people filled the small auditorium. It was the day of the performance, an event Noah had suggested as a way for Eliza to share her progress and reconnect with the world. Elisa stood backstage, her hands trembling slightly as she practiced the signs she would use to introduce herself. "You'll be great," Noah signed, his calm smile steadying her nerves. "Just remember, this isn't about perfection. It's about sharing your journey." Elisa nodded, her heart pounding as her name was announced. She stepped onto the stage, the bright lights momentarily blinding her. Taking a deep breath, she looked out at the audience, a mix of people from the community, some with hearing impairments, others without. Her gaze fell on Noah, who gave her a small, encouraging nod. She began to sign, her movements deliberate and clear. "Hello, my name is Eliza. I used to be a pianist. After an accident, I lost my hearing and thought I lost my music too. But today, I want to show you that music isn't just something you hear, it's something you feel." The audience watched intently, their eyes following her every motion. Elisa moved to the keyboard and placed her hands on the keys. For a moment, she hesitated, the weight of her journey pressing down on her. Then she began to play. The piece was simple, a soft melody she and Noah had worked on together, designed to highlight the vibrations that could be felt rather than heard. As her fingers danced across the keys, she felt the music resonate through her, filling the silence with rhythm and emotion. The audience responded in kind. Some closed their eyes, swaying gently to the vibrations they could sense through the floor. Others signed words of encouragement, "Beautiful, amazing, thank you." As the final note faded, Eliza looked up, tears welling in her eyes. The room erupted in silent applause, hands waving in the air, a gesture of appreciation in the deaf community. Noah joined her on stage, signing to the audience. "This is what it means to find a new voice. Elisa has shown us all that silence can still hold so much meaning." Eliza turned to him, her heart full. "Thank you," she signed, the words carrying a depth she couldn't express aloud. Walking off stage, she felt lighter than she had in months. For the first time since the accident, she didn't feel like a shadow of her former self. She felt whole, standing in a new light she had created for herself. The performance at the community center was a turning point for Eliza. For weeks after, she replayed the experience in her mind, the applause, the encouragement, and most importantly, the realization that she hadn't lost her ability to connect with others. She had simply found a new way. Elisa began teaching herself to adapt more pieces of music, blending her classical training with her newfound understanding of rhythm and vibration. She spent hours at the piano, her fingers rediscovering a confidence she thought was lost. Every note she played was a triumph, a reminder of how far she had come. One afternoon, Noah invited her to the park where they sat on a bench overlooking a quiet pond. He seemed different, relaxed, almost reflective. "You've come a long way," he signed, his movements deliberate. Elisa smiled. "Because you believed in me," she signed back. Noah shook his head. "You believed in yourself. That's what mattered." For a moment, they sat in comfortable silence. Then Noah said something that surprised her. I've been thinking of starting a program for people like us, something to help others find their voice again through music or sign language. Would you help me? The idea stirred something in Eliza. She had spent so long thinking of her loss as the end of her story. Now, for the first time, she saw it as the beginning of something greater. I'd love to, she signed, her heart swelling with purpose. Together, they began planning workshops, blending their skills to create a program that combined music, sign language, and community support. Word spread quickly, and soon they had a small but dedicated group of participants eager to learn and share. As the first workshop concluded weeks later, Eliza stood in front of the group, her hands steady and her voice silent but strong, filling the room with emotion. She signed her final words of encouragement. In every silence, there is a chance to create a new melody. Thank you for being part of mine. The participants clapped, their hands waving enthusiastically, and Eliza felt a warmth she hadn't experienced in years. She glanced at Noah, whose proud smile mirrored her own. Walking home that evening, Eliza realized she was no longer defined by what she had lost. She was defined by what she had built, a bridge between worlds, a melody that resonated beyond sound.